How's everyone doing tonight? Yeah, come on, it's our candidate debate. We need some... Well, it's just so great to be amongst you, be among neighbors, especially for a night where we're going to be discussing a range of important topics that affect us, affect our neighborhood, affect Allston-Brighton. My name is Ricky Meinke. I'm one of the organizers of the debate, and I'll be co-moderating tonight with
Marchando.
So before we go into our candidate introductions and kind of get into the debate itself, we just want to go over some moderation rules and just kind of some culture of the audience, if you will. We do not have microphones up here. Charlesview has some amazing technology to where the microphones are above us. They run all along the room. So that means any sounds in the room could be picked up for our about over 200 Zoom guests that are listening in. And we are recording this, and so if you have some personal conversations, it could be in the recording later. We don't want that to happen, okay? And so we're gonna ask for, just extreme silence as possible. If you need to step out of the room, there is a back door that will get you to this hallway, to the restrooms that you can use versus using the double doors. As you can see, we strategically placed Tony there to turn anyone away. The bouncer of the debate, it was in the email. So please be respectful of this debate. Our candidates in their responses and your responses in audience, we ask that you hold any applause once the debate is over. Any reactions, if one of our candidates is like, we want another highway through Allston-Brighton, please stay as quiet as you could be with that response, right? Because again, it could be picked up by our Zoom participants, and then we want to make sure they have a great experience here with this debate as well. But before we get started with our introductions for our candidates, I do just want to welcome Joanne to give some few words here on behalf of Charlesview.
Well, welcome to our great experiment here. Yeah. You all are the first to check out this hybrid Zoom room. So please let me know what your experience was. And as Ricky said, those microphones are very sensitive. So be aware if you are having conversations. Just a couple of housekeeping issues. If you parked in the garage, that's great. You'll need to have your car out of there by 9. Because that's when the towing company comes through, and we don't want anybody getting their cars towed. As Ricky said, this is, this is a time of turmoil. There's a lot going on, and we really look at this space and this site as a space that is inclusive and respectful, and we really want everybody to feel comfortable here and to feel respected in this process. So please heed what Ricky said in terms of your comments. There will be time at the end for you all to chat briefly, I think, with the candidates. And we look forward to having a great debate tonight. So thank you for coming. We really appreciate you coming, and have a good night.
Cell phone, can you please raise it? There's a button at the side if you can put it.
Yes, you will get.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, and so just in terms of general rules that you'll experience today, candidates will be asked a question. We will alternate on who will ask or answer first. They will have a 2-minute timeline for a response. Other candidate will have another 2 minutes, and then a 1-minute follow-up for each candidate, okay? Like Joanne said, at the end of the debate, we will have some time for the candidates to ask maybe more personal questions from yourself. The questions that we are asking tonight was sourced from a committee of leaders across Allston-Brighton, but we did also do our best to network with different organizations and then put a call out to neighbors to collect questions too, just to ensure the topics we're discussing tonight really hit on a range of topics across the neighborhood. Does that sound good, everyone? Great. All right, so let's get a thunderous applause, get all the sound out now. I'd like to introduce to your left, you have Councilor Breadon. deBlecourt. Candidates will take our seats. All right, we'll first start with a 2-minute opening for Councilor Breadon. 2 minutes to yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the organizer of this debate. The last time we did this, the last cycle, we were all on Zoom, and it was a completely different experience to this evening. So it's really good to see people in person, and I'm very impressed to say over 200 people are joining us online. So this is very, very good. Thank you all for being here, and thank all those folks who are coming, joining us online. I also thank Ricky and Cindy for moderating this evening, and for all the organizers. It takes a lot of, I've done this myself in the past, so I know how much work it takes, and thank you all for the work. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Breadon. I am the City Councilor for Allston-Brighton District 9. I came to Boston in 1995 as an immigrant from Northern Ireland, and I settled in Allston-Brighton, and I love this place. I love this community. And for the last 25 years, since I've been 27 years now, I've been a community activist, and the last 4 I've been had the honor and pleasure of serving as your city councillor. It's been an incredible 4 years. As you all know, we came through a global pandemic that impacted every aspect of our lives here in Allston-Brighton. And I'm very proud to say that this community pulled together and worked together to help support our most vulnerable residents and to really get us through a very difficult time. And I have the honor of working with so many of the nonprofits and the community organizations in that process. So I think for me personally, public service is about doing good and helping your neighbor to live a better life. And also public service is about identifying problems and trying to come up with solutions. And I'm a very sort of collaborative person by nature. So I reach out and try and bring in partners who have, if I don't know something, bring in partners who do understand the problem and see if we can move the ball down the field and get a better outcome. So it's my great honor to work with some incredible people. And I also want to give a shout out to my team in City Hall. I have an incredible staff who work diligently and are laser focused, as we are as a team, on the needs of Allston-Brighton. And as a district councillor, that's your #1 responsibility, to meet the needs and address the needs of your constituents in your district. And I'm very honoured to work with some incredible people in my own team and in City Hall and in all the city departments. They work every day. They go to work every day to serve the people of Boston. As we know, we have some big challenges. Housing crisis. We have climate change. Anyone who had any doubts that climate change was a thing, I think we were relieved of those delusions over the summer. We saw extreme weather events that unlike anything we'd ever seen before. And I've got 10 seconds left. We have a transit system that's falling apart. We have children and young people who are struggling as we come out of COVID. We have a lot of work to do. So I'm here before you today to present myself as your city councillor and to ask for your support to run for another 2 years to represent you in City Hall. Thank you.
Jacob, why don't you introduce yourself to the team?
Thank you very much. Thank you both, Ricky and Cindy, and thank you to Kelly and Tony and Liv and everyone who brought this space together. This is an incredibly important opportunity for the neighborhood to learn more about this race. My name is Jacob deBlecourt. I'm a renter. I live over in Allston. I'm running for city council because I've seen the kind of power that the city council has to make our community a better place with the right kinds of representation. I previously served as the Director of Public Policy and Communications for Boston City Councilor Julia Mejia. I started my job there in January of 2020, and then of course in March of 2020, the whole world shut down. Within the first week of lockdown, I was already working to create new community space where none had existed before. Our office held one of the first conversations in the city about how the pandemic was going to impact the LGBTQ community. I drafted progressive legislation that spoke to a number of the inequities that we knew were going to rise up as a result of the pandemic. And we worked to make sure that we were addressing the issues of our community with the respect and the urgency that they deserved. By comparison, my experiences as a resident and as a renter living in Allston-Brighton were ones where I had to pay $50 for an Uber to get to East Boston because that was the only place I could get a COVID test. We were one of the last neighborhoods to get a COVID vaccine site. We had the bombshell dropped on us that we were losing the Jackson Man, that we lost the Great Scott and Wonder Bar and the Sound Museum. And I think all this goes to show that, working as a city councilor is more than just about how you vote, it's about what your voice is. And I don't think there's ever going to be any question that we'll have a progressive vote in Allston-Brighton, but I think we need a progressive voice as well. One who's ready to work with the community and create a shared vision for the neighborhood where people can plant their roots in this community. We're bringing people together instead of forcing them to move away. And so I want people to walk away knowing that if you're not happy with the status quo in this neighborhood, that you have a different option in this race. And so I look forward to being able to talk about the issues with you all. I'm a big policy nerd, so it's a good thing that they are timing me because I could go on forever about the nitty gritty. And so I hope to have the opportunity to go into those details further with you in person because I really am passionate about this neighborhood. I'm not originally from Allston-Brighton. Nobody's perfect, right? But Allston-Brighton is my home. I love it here. I want to be here for as long as humanly possible. It's just a question if I can afford to do that. And I hope to be able to get into City Hall and to make changes that make it easier for people to plant their roots in this community because that's what matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Our first question is to you, Councilor Breedon. A 2021 article about Allston-Brighton detailed Boston University students arriving at an apartment to find broken windows, trash, and terrible conditions to live in. This example involves students, but challenging conditions for renters also affect young professionals, families, and elderly in our neighborhood. These challenges can often turn away new families and have current renters feel they cannot plant their roots in our neighborhood. Given this dynamic and knowing the challenges Allston-Brighton tenants experience, what ways will you hold landlords in Allston-Brighton accountable to providing a healthy and safe experience for students, artists, families, and our elderly?
Thank you. First of all, if you walk into a new apartment that you're renting and you see conditions that are not up to code, broken windows, whatever, first thing you do is you call 311 and you ask 311 to send out a housing inspector from inspectional services to go and look at that situation. These are violations of the sanitary code. They're illegal. Landlords have a responsibility to fix the problem. But the city can't fix a problem if they don't know there is a problem. You have to call 311 and ask for ISD inspectors to go out. In terms of holding landlords accountable, this past 2 weeks ago, we had a hearing to raise the fines for sanitary code violations. The sanitary code violations were set in 1854, where the maximum fine was $50. $50 was a hell of a lot of money in 1854. In present day money, that would be about $1,800. The sanitary code, the maximum fine that we have on the books right now is $300. So we're filing a home rule petition to raise the fines. We also have a scofflaw ordinance in the works in which we would hold landlords accountable. We had a hearing about a scofflaw in which landlords who are bad actors consistently don't comply with sanitary code and don't have good living conditions for their tenants, that they would go on a public facing dashboard, that we would literally shame them into doing a better job. They did this in Toronto, and the landlords in Toronto, you don't want to see your name in lights and saying you're a bad landlord. Prospective tenants can come in and say, oh, I don't think I'll rent from that guy. So those are the sort of things that we have been working on. The tenant situation is, we have a very large range of housing types in our neighborhood. We have folks who are owners of a 2-family home who rent out their second apartment at well below market rate. And then we have big corporate landlords. We have the whole range of types of landlords and tenants situations in our city. So I feel that we just keep working it, but we also have to work with our city departments to try and hold our landlords accountable to make sure that living conditions are sanitary and up to code, and to ensure that everyone has a chance to have a decent place to live in Allston-Brighton. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Jacob, same question. How will you hold landlords accountable and be an advocate for Allston-Brighton tenants?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important question, right? Because we're a majority renter neighborhood. I've been a renter my entire adult life. When I moved to Boston, I did so to go to UMass Boston, go Beacons. And UMass Boston at the time didn't have any dorms. So at age 18, I was already a renter. And when you're a renter in a place like Boston, you already have to become your own renting and housing advocate because it feels like we're so under-resourced. So when at age 18, we didn't have heat in our apartment in the middle of February, I just assumed that that's what you deal with. You just don't have heat anymore. And so many people are going through situations in regards to their landlord where they're not being supported. When I've been knocking on doors, I talk to people and I ask them how many of them have paid an application fee, which the Attorney General's office came out and said is illegal. Most of them have said that they have paid an application fee before. So there's a huge gap when it comes to the rights that people already have and people's knowledge of those rights, which is why back in July, I hosted a tenants' rights information session with folks from around the neighborhood, where we brought together advocates and people who are renters in the neighborhood to talk about what rights currently exist for tenants and what do we need to do and what can I do as a housing rights advocate to expand those things. So really quickly to talk about a couple of tenant supports policies, the number one thing that we have to talk about is rent control, right? Earlier this year, the City Council passed a home rule petition to bring back rent control, which we absolutely need to do. But the home rule petition that they passed, the maximum amount of rent that a landlord is allowed to increase your rent by every year is 10% of your rent. 10% of my rent is $300 a month. I can't afford that. Most of my friends and neighbors can't afford that either. Likewise, the home rule petition only said that it would apply to people who are renewing their lease instead of people who are coming into a new lease. But in a neighborhood like Allston, when 30% of people don't live in the same apartment that they did the year before, we're leaving a lot of people off the table when it comes to talking about rent control. And then lastly, what I want to talk about is making sure that we're holding some of our largest landlords in the neighborhood accountable, and those are our colleges and universities. We absolutely have to make sure that our colleges and universities are being better neighbors. That's why I support the Pilot Action Group's call for a commission to examine how we can make sure that our largest institutions are paying their fair share and creating more supportive housing opportunities for their students.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you, Jacob.
Councilor Breadon, you have a minute follow-up?
Oh, sure, thank you. 80% of our residents are renters, and we have an economically diverse group of people. We have folks who are paying $500 a month for rent, right up to people who are paying $7,000 a month for rent in the neighborhood. I think, to Jacob's point, there are so many, there's a need for more understanding and knowledge of renters' rights. And I think my former colleague, now Attorney General Andrea Campbell, did an incredibly useful series of Facebook of our posts this summer, just as the rent tenants were coming back on tenants' rights. The rent control issue is very, very difficult. The cap is 10%. The baseline rent control is 5% plus 5% plus inflation to a maximum of 10%. So that means if you had 5% and inflation is running at 15%, the increase should be 20%. But we've put a cap on it at 5%. It's not the best and most stringent level of rent control that we could have, but it is a compromise. The rent control has gone up to the State House as a home rule petition, and as everything else happens, you send a home rule petition up to the State House, it goes into a committee, and you might never see it again. So it's a sort of a balancing act of trying to send up legislation to the State House that has half a chance of passing. So that bill that the mayor sent up is a compromise bill to try and see if we can have something that's reasonable and workable that might pass. Otherwise, we're not going to have any rent control. We're just going to stay the way we are.
Follow-up, Jacob.
Thank you. Yeah. So what I would have done instead of passing this home rule petition is I would have worked with the State House. There's already a state rep who was working to get a rent control ballot referendum on the ballot, and that would give every city and town in the state of Massachusetts the ability to design their own kind of rent control. It's called home rule. That would allow Boston the opportunity to create rent control that actually works for residents in Allston-Brighton. And I'm worried that what the city council did is they chose to pass a home rule petition rather than passing the right home rule petition. And so I think that we need a little bit more foresight to understand that if we had just worked with the State House to get that ballot referendum on the ballot as soon as possible, the voters could decide, because I think Boston back in the 90s when the original rent control came up for a vote, Boston voted to keep rent control. So we've always wanted rent control. And I think if we had the option to design a rent control that works locally to us so that we're not having to appeal to a state representative in North Adams for rent control in Boston, we're going to be a lot better off. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you both, Councilor Breadon and Jacob. So the next question is about neighborhood association development review process. And one part of Mayor Wu's agenda is reviewing how neighborhood associations interact with the approval process of new businesses and developments in a neighborhood. Involvement from neighborhood associations means communities can voice concerns or thoughts regarding projects. But advocates for change say that neighborhood associations aren't always representative of neighborhoods or welcoming to new neighbors. What do you perceive is the biggest need of reform to the development process in neighborhoods, and what involvement should neighborhood associations have in that process? And Jacob, you can go first.
Great, yeah. So to start off, like I'm a total nerd when it comes to neighborhood civic associations. Like my partner could tell you that I watch the ACA meetings like other people watch the Housewives. Like I'm like, good call, Tony. That was a good call on that one. I think they're fantastic. I think it's a great opportunity, not just to have connections with your local neighbors, but it really gives you the opportunity to understand on a block by block basis what's going on in your neighborhood. So I think they're great spaces, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out that, I'm one of the very few people in a lot of these neighborhood civic associations that is, a younger person or a renter. And I've spoken with advocates who do run a lot of these neighborhood associations, and they've acknowledged that there is a need to create more intergenerationality in our civic associations. And that we just need to be doing more to bring in newer folks into the neighborhood, renters, younger people, because we need to make sure that the spirit of civic engagement that has existed in this neighborhood, this is a super civically engaged neighborhood. And we need to make sure that we're continuing that spirit of civic engagement into the next generation, which is getting incredibly hard because all the people who are most civically engaged in the neighborhood are getting displaced because they can't afford to live here anymore. So part of making sure our neighborhood associations are more robust is making sure that we are creating generational opportunities for people to plant their roots here so that they can take part in these civic associations. And then quickly, when it comes to the development review process, I'm a total nerd. I sit in on as many IAG meetings. For those who don't know, currently, whenever there's a large development in the city of Boston, the city councilor nominates a group of people to sit on an IAG, an impact advisory group, and they provide advice and consent on how the development's supposed to go. Typically, though, you're limited to the number of people that as a city councilor, unless someone's reaching out to you to be on an IAG, which doesn't happen as often as we'd like, right? So what I want to do instead is I want to change to what I would call an opt-in system, whereby if you live within a certain radius of a new development, you get a letter in the mail saying, hey, here's what's going to happen at this new development. Would you like to sit on this IAG? And we should make it paid because we should be paying people for their time. And so I think that we have a lot of opportunities in the neighborhood to not only incentivize taking part in the community, but to make it a lot more fun and pleasurable for the people that are already there. Because I think even when the conversations in these civic associations are tough, if anything, I approach them with even more gusto because I love them so much. So that's what I would do.
Thank you, Jacob. And Councilor Breadon, what do you perceive as the biggest need of development process reform, and what involvement should neighborhood associations have in the process? And you've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. The development review process, as we all know, in Allston-Brighton is a very intense chore. It's a chore. We have dozens of projects under review at any one time in recent, and it's a tremendous challenge to ensure that community voice is heard when we have these impact advisory groups. We come into office as I come in as a new city councillor, I was very aware of the fact that we had a need to diversify and bring new people into that conversation. So we set about really reaching out to anyone and everyone who was interested in serving on an impact advisory group. It's a significant commitment to be on an advisory group. Some of these projects are under review for years. And thank you to anyone in this room who has served in an impact advisory group, because it is a tremendous service to our community, that you bring the concerns of the community to the table and talk about the impacts of that development on your neighbours and on your neighbourhood. I am a great believer in the importance of having neighbourhood associations. I know we've been in some fights in the neighbourhood. We're threatened with losing the Faneuil Branch Library, and we mobilised and organised, and the neighbourhood turned out, and we saved that library. It was one night in Oak Square, we turned out 500 people to say, no, we're not losing our library. So I think there's pros and cons. This is a very open and welcoming neighbourhood. We accept and support development. We are not anti-development in this neighbourhood. We have more development than any other, there's more development happening in this neighbourhood than almost any other district in the neighbourhood, East Boston, South Boston, maybe, but we're holding our own here. So I feel that bringing the voices in, hearing what people are saying, and trying to make development work for the people in this neighbourhood. We need affordable housing. We need housing that's got a range of affordability, from low-income people up to workforce housing. And we need to really consider the impacts in terms of preserving our green space, improving our tree canopy, and all of those quality of life issues that make this a livable neighbourhood. So neighbourhood associations are important. We want to diversify and bring more people into the conversation. And I also think that the way we've been doing it with hybrid meetings has also brought an opportunity for so many people to participate. Folks who are taking care of an elder or taking care of kids at home, they are able to join an IAG meeting and listen in and give feedback of what's happening from their perspective. That's one thing. That is one good thing that has come out of COVID, is that we've been able to hold, like tonight, we have a hybrid meeting. There's a lot of people listening in, and people are able to get a better understanding. They're able to listen in and understand what's going on and be able to give feedback. So I think it's sort of democratized our community process with regard to development. And, I think we have work to do, obviously. Folks who are English is not their first language, folks with disabilities, folks who have childcare and family responsibilities, or a work schedule that doesn't allow them to attend or participate. We have work to do to try and bring more voices into that conversation.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Liz. So,
Yeah.
rebuttal?
Yeah, just a quick thing that I also wanted to add is when I was working with the city council, one of the things that I had tried to spearhead in our office was actually already looking at IAG reform. We had drafted a hearing order, and we had actually worked with a lot of local Allston-Brighton residents, worked with Tony, worked with Barbara Moss, worked with a lot of other really great folks who were passionate about trying to find ways to change the way in which we approach community review to ensure that it's actually the community that is giving it a review. Because, as a renter, I want to make sure that there is a voice for renters on these panels. But I also understand that, if you're a homeowner who lives deep in Oak Square, why is someone who lives in Packard's Corner, we have to understand that there is a hyper locality going on. And changing the IAG reform, which I already started when I was working with the city council, having the opportunity to finish that on the council, I think is a really important opportunity to ensure that the folks in this neighborhood are able to make sure that their voices are heard, because there's nothing more important than making sure that we're creating housing that is affordable, accessible, and desirable for the people that live here. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
That's okay, Liz. Do you want? We have a minute. We could extend to you as well.
No, let's keep going. I think there's lots of questions.
Yeah,
Just
we'll
keep
get to
going.
it. All right, folks. Allston has its nickname as Rock City, but it's also known by another name, Rat City at times. I myself, when living in my first apartment, dealt with a number of rats on Linden Street, even had one dying in my wall. Instead of removing it, my landlord said the smell will go away and gave me a discount on rent instead. Rats have also become more commonplace in Brighton too, despite the wild coyotes and wild cats doing their best to keep them at bay. Addressing this rat problem involves local businesses, landlords, and education on best practices to safely and humanely mitigate rats. How, as city councilor, will you address the rat problem in Allston-Brighton? Councilor Breen, 2 minutes to you.
Every day we deal with calls about rats. I had a call this afternoon about rats. And what we usually do is we work with Inspectional Services, Environmental Department to come out and do, if it's a particularly bad case, we ask them to come and visit, to do a walk on the site. We did talk to Inspectional Services Department. They've been doing this. They're experts in the field. They're all certified rodent control practitioners, and they understand the factors that contribute to the problem. The rodent problem has gotten much worse in Allston-Brighton and across the city since COVID. And we're really in a moment of crisis almost with the rodent problems. But you know, we have to remember that the rodent problem is a human created problem. We have the rodents, as the ISD will say, they need water, they need food, and they need shelter. And the way we manage our properties, or the way we handle our trash, or the way our restaurants deal with their food waste is all contributing to the problem. One of the issues that the city has been working on is to try and get food out of the trash cans. So we have the curbside green bins for food waste. We started off with a pilot last year with 10,000 bins. It's gone up to 30,000 this year. The cap on that is apartments or buildings that have got 6 units. And we get calls all the time from folks who live in larger buildings to say, we want to do composting as well. We need to ask our developers and the BPDA to factor in, how are we going to do food disposal and handle food waste in all these new buildings that we're building? Because if all the food from those big buildings goes in the dumpster, then we're going to just contribute more to the problem. The rodent issue is complex. There's no easy answer, but I think we really have to just take it like one block at a time, and everyone holding our landlords accountable to providing adequate trash cans for our tenants, making sure that they keep their properties clean and that there isn't food waste and trash lying around the place. All those factors contribute to the problem. And it's distressing. It is very, you know, as someone called me this morning that we're going to do another walk next week. Her husband bringing out the trash cans, a rat runs up his leg. But we are the only city, one of the few cities in the country that allow people to put trash bags out on the sidewalk. We shouldn't be putting trash bags on the sidewalk. We had a meeting, we had a hearing recently with ISD, and they said they talked to folks in New York. New York is going hard and hard on this. They are increasing their fines. They are making it, you can't put trash bags out on the sidewalk. They're really, the mayor of New York apparently is very, very afraid of rats, and he's taken this very personally, so it's getting done. But you know, I feel that, you know, we're in a moment where we just have to really push hard and get this done. Which we got extra equipment for our Inspectional Services Department. In our ARPA funds, we got extra money for the Inspectional Services Department. We got handheld tablets for them so that they could record violations in real time, not using pencil and paper. We're trying to increase the staff at ISD, so we're giving them the tools, increasing the staff, and then supporting them to do the job. And then we as citizens have to do a lot of just educate ourselves about what's important. The case we had this morning that called me today said there's rats running up and down the street, but there's a sofa sitting on the, and it's a renter community. There's a sofa sitting on the front porch of the house across the way, and the rats are running up the front stairs and living in that sofa. There's a rat's nest in that sofa and that front porch. Those are the sort of things that we need to do.
Thank you, Councilor Breadon.
Stay away from that sofa.
Yeah.
And Jacob, 2 minutes to you.
Yeah, I just took up a new sofa to my place, so I think I need to go check it. So I've been knocking on doors in this neighborhood since June, and like the #1 issue that I hear talking to people on the doors is that the rat problem is just out of control. I mean, it's so gross, right? Canvassing on Tuesday nights before trash day is like one of the worst things you can do, trust me, because I feel like I'm getting chased out of Brighton sometimes with all the rats that are there now. It's not surprising though, because according to Orkin, in the past 5 years, we've gone from being the 15th rattiest city in the country to the 13th rattiest city in the country. So we've literally been getting rattier by the year, right? That's why I'm proud to be the only candidate in this race with a dedicated policy platform to address the rat issue. I call it the rat form. And it's not surprising what we need in this neighborhood, right? We need more trash pickups. Once per week is just not enough for especially the busiest parts of this neighborhood. We need more municipal trash cans in the neighborhood. I used to have a metal can outside my building and it got taken away. Why in Rat City of all places are we taking away trash cans instead of putting more in is beyond me. We need zoning reform to make sure that any new building that goes up in the neighborhood has dedicated trash disposal sites in the building, because every Tuesday evening I place a bare trash bag right out onto the curb, which is just a buffet for the rats. And lastly, I want to appoint a rat czar. As the councilor had pointed out, there are a lot of different departments that handle the rat issue in the city of Boston. You've got ISD, you've got the Department of Public Works, where we need to see a lot more money going to them. Housing, the Office of Housing Stability obviously deals with tenants' concerns when it comes to rats. So there's a lot of different departments who are kind of working on this issue together, right? And I feel like we would benefit from not only having someone on the council who can coordinate these groups together, but also having a dedicated policy person whose job it is to coordinate the rat issue in this neighborhood. One final thing I do want to suggest is, when it comes to fines and fees, in my building, when someone places their trash bag out on the curb on a day before that isn't trash day, we do get a fine. We get a little green thing in the mail, but it's addressed to the building. I live in a building with 6 units. So we walk past that fine and go, hey, all right, cool. Someone got a fine for putting their trash out. I'm not going to pay that. So I think for larger buildings in the neighborhood, I think that education as opposed to like fines and enforcement is probably the better way to go. I think when I moved into Allston-Brighton, or rather when I moved into Boston, I didn't know how to keep a clean house because I never really worried about that before. My mom would tell me to clean my room and I cleaned my room. So I think it's not necessarily out of negligence that people are letting the rat problem get so bad. I think it's just a lack of knowledge about how to be a better community member when it comes to the rat issue. And I think education is definitely the better pathway that I would go down.
Thank you very much, Jacob. I just want to remind both candidates, we do have a lot of questions. We're more than halfway through our time here and less than halfway through our questions. So just be mindful of that. We will stop you at your 2-minute mark. The next question is around mental health. And one perspective we wanted to make sure was reflected in this debate was our youth. The following question comes from the Allston-Brighton Youth Coalition, which stands for Prevention, Awareness, and Understanding Substances with Education and Support. This group provides high schoolers with leadership development and skills to develop drug prevention strategies in their neighborhood. So here is their question. Allston-Brighton youth are struggling with their mental health. How will you support mental health in Allston-Brighton youth and their access to mental health services? And Jacob, you can go first.
Thank you. I have a niece named Kalia, and she graduated high school during the height of the pandemic back in 2021. And so I kind of had a front row seat to seeing how young people were expected to sort of transition into this online space. And let me tell you, if you do Zoom choir practice, it changes you. It really does. And, when you see that and you see all the impacts that youth mental health is having out on the streets, we've been seeing a lot of reports of, youth violence popping up in places like the South Bay Center. And we've also seen responses to that trying to lead more towards like, well, we need to, do more enforcement. We need to punish these kids. To me, I really want to step back and take a much more compassionate approach to this issue. I'm the child of 2 social workers. So I know firsthand that like Band-Aid punitive solutions to youth violence is not really going to fix anything. 30 years ago, we had the Boston Miracle, where our city invested funding into violence prevention tactics like youth mentorship programs, job opportunities for young people, more mental health opportunities in Boston Public Schools. By means of quick example, the city is operating on, I believe, a 500-to-1 scale ratio of students to mental health counselors. There are advocacy organizations that are calling it for it to be as low as 250-to-1. So we really need to look at that. We also need to look at the way in which youth mental health is being supported in schools. So Boston Public Schools comes out with an executive report, and they found that in 2017, roughly 7% of schools in Boston Public Schools had 0 staff on site trained in bullying intervention. By 2020, that rose to 39%. So going into the pandemic, roughly half of all schools in Boston Public Schools had no staff on site trained in bullying intervention. So this is as much an issue of compassion as it is about resources. We need to make sure that we are creating mental health curriculum opportunities. That's something I worked on when I was with the council. We need to make sure that we're funding more opportunities for therapists and social workers to get into the schools. And I think that with those changes, we're going to see a really big improvement in young people's mental health nowadays, because it's the most important thing that's facing our youth today.
Thank you very much. And Councilor Breedon?
This is a wonderful question from Allston-Brighton, because as kids, young people They do a great job working with peer-to-peer work in our schools. Unfortunately, they are limited because they have Allston-Brighton Causes needs more money to be able to expand that program, to do more of that peer-to-peer work. Mental health for young people is something that is like an iceberg. We see the tip of the iceberg, but we don't actually see the extent of the problem. And COVID and remote learning has contributed greatly to stress and the mental health challenges of our young people. There's a few good bright lights on the horizon. One is really right here in the neighborhood. Franciscan Hospital has just set up an affiliation with Children's Hospital of Boston. And they are in the process of, they have an Article 80 project to build a new building at Franciscan on Warren Street that will expand our behavioral health services for our youth across the city and in the region. The Franciscan already does a lot of mental health support services for our students in our Boston public schools. I'm also a great believer in sports and arts programming in schools. We are underfunding our sports programs. For those of you who don't know me, my dad died when I was 14 years old. I was the oldest girl in the family. I had to take on a parental role. I was under incredible stress. I was tippling out of my mom's wine bottles. The thing that saved my life was sports, athletics, being able to participate in sports. It's a great way to build camaraderie and get support for yourself. And I think sports programming, school programming, not just competitive sort of, but be able to participate in sports and arts programming in our schools are really critically important. It's sort of low-hanging fruit, and it's a very holistic way to engage with our young people, build really good skills and confidence, self-confidence, and help them to cope with the stress of modern day life.
Thank you, Councilor. We'll move on to our next question. Councilor Breedon, recently you voted to support additional funding for BRIC, which is the Boston Regional Intelligence Center, which critics against funding have determined it as a tool of human surveillance that will be used to harass Bostonians of color, young people, activists, and immigrants. In the ACLU's 2019 candidate packet, you spoke out against BRIC with the following answer. If elected to City Council, I will support policies that restrict and prohibit the Boston Police Department's ability to surveil any individual who has not been suspected of committing a crime and require more evidence for individuals to be labeled as having committed a crime. Councilor Breedon, how do you explain your change in opinion and recent vote to fund BRIC?
Yes, I did vote not to fund. I did not support giving the BRIC money in the last two cycles, and this time I changed my mind. In recent years, since I would say since January 6th, when we saw an insurrection, an attempted overthrow of our government, and we have seen increased anti-Semitic activity. We've seen increased white supremacy and neo-Nazi activity. We've seen anti-LGBT activity. We're living in, our world is changing, and I spoke with the new commissioner of the Boston Police Department, who's a reform-minded police officer, police commissioner. He acknowledges that there has been problems in the past with the gang database, but we've asked for a commitment to they're fixing those problems. We have asked for regular accountability for them to come in and explain themselves year on year, to provide an annual report. This is a one-off. These grants come every year. So if we don't see progress and we're not happy with the outcome, we can say, no, we're not going to fund you this time. But we're sort of trying to give our new commissioner of police an opportunity. He's a reformer, to give him an opportunity to try and give him some tools to fix this situation. As we saw in Maine this week, someone with severe, very serious mental health problems got hold of an assault rifle and killed many, many people in a community. We need to use the tools that BRIC has access to try and anticipate a terrorist attack like that. Terrorist attacks and domestic terrorism, and see it and intervene before it gets to the point of a massacre or a terrorist attack in our city. We've seen it before. I come from Northern Ireland. I'm all too familiar with that. And giving the police department at this moment in time the tools to try and address these concerns was something I felt was the right thing to do.
Thank you, Councilor. Jacob, 2 minutes to you.
Thanks very much. So for those who don't know, BRIC stands for Boston Regional Intelligence Center. It's sort of the surveillance arm of the Boston Police Department. Housed within the BRIC is something called the Gang Database. And the Gang Database is a system whereby the police upload information about people that they suspect to be gang members. The way that used to work is there will be a point system. If you got 6 points on your record, you were known as gang affiliated. And if you got 10 points on your record, you were known as a known gang member. If you were the victim of a crime that was committed by a known gang member, you got 3 points on your record. So just for being the victim of a crime committed by a gang member, you were already halfway towards being gang affiliated yourself. The point system made no sense. BPD did go away with it, but that's only because the federal government intervened and called the point system erratic. So I feel like the only changes that we've seen coming when it comes to the BRIC has only because they've been forced by higher authorities to make these changes because of how damaging it has been to the community. And most importantly, I do want to talk about, because we did have that devastating incident of what happened in Maine, but the gentleman, the individual who did the mass shooting was on databases. He was well known by the police and was almost yellow flagged because of his suspicious activity. So I think we need to ask ourselves, not just whether we should have databases, but whether these databases even work in the first place. And I think time and time again, we've proven that they don't really work, and instead they just harass and intimidate people, which just is not the product of policing that we should be aiming for.
Liz, a minute, follow up.
I completely accept the history of the gang database, but the gang database is a small portion of what the BRIC actually does. And I feel that, we are going to hold the police department accountable on the gang database. They have improved some things. They're under scrutiny from the federal government and the AG's office. So we are going to try and hold them accountable, and at the same time give them the tools to address the many concerns that we see in our nation. And the other issue with regard to the BRIC is it's a regional intelligence center. And if we don't take it, the city of Boston doesn't take it, and the Boston Police Department don't take it, there are other police departments in the region who would be very happy to take it. And we would not have the same control and oversight that we have right now. So that's another, that was another part of my thinking when I was made that vote this recently. Thank you.
Minute to you, Jacob.
Thanks very much. The way I see it is, regardless of where you stand on the BRIC issue, one of the very few legal responsibilities of the council is to scrutinize money that comes in to be spent by the administration. The council only held one hearing when it came to $3.4 million in funding to go to the BRIC. I just don't feel like the council did a thorough enough job in investigating how this money is being used and how they're holding the police accountable. At the very least, there should have been 1 or 2 more conversations about this spending, giving more opportunity for the advocates to step in, because only one hearing on this issue just doesn't do anything to actually scrutinize and learn from the Boston Police Department about how they're making those changes. That's it, thanks.
Thank you very much.
We'll go to question 6. Yeah. So I just want to recognize the history that we have with this year's election, as this is the first primary election in Allston-Brighton where both candidates are members of our LGBTQ community. And so I think that's just round of applause. The city of Boston. We didn't want to assume, but it was some wonderful history to celebrate here in our own neighborhood. So in a few days, as a nation, we will also be recognizing Trans Day of Remembrance, a day that began as a response to the murder of Rita Hester, a Black trans woman, and also a Allston-Brighton resident. This past summer, the Allston Village Main Streets Association celebrated our first Pride Week in Allston and celebrated the queer and LGBTQ community of Allston-Brighton. And so how, as city councilor, will you support, advocate, and celebrate LGBTQ neighbors and residents in Allston-Brighton and also Boston? 2 minutes to you, Jacob.
Great. Yeah, I also just want to take a moment to celebrate the fact that we've got 2 people of the LGBTQ plus community running for office, and only in Allston-Brighton could something like that happen. And I think it's really special. So again, like, this is a great moment. I was living in Allston-Brighton when I came out of the closet. And it was the friends and found family that I had in the community who really taught me a lot about what it means to be a queer person in this neighborhood. And I'm really blessed to have them in my life. They span all different backgrounds and age groups, and it's that sense of camaraderie that I think is not just exclusive to the queer community in Allston-Brighton, but it's the sense of what Allston-Brighton, I think what makes us so great as a neighborhood is that we're always here for each other. With that being said, this has also been a neighborhood where I have experienced harassment and intimidation as a queer person. I've been called names out on the street. I've been harassed in all different things. I helped put on a drag show at the Breadon Allston Congregational Church. We raised $1,500 for their food pantry, but we had to worry about whether or not we needed to hire armed security to make sure that it was safe. So we're dealing with some very real problems, even here in Allston-Brighton, when it comes to how we're battling queerphobia, transphobia, and homophobia. That's why I've been working with really great advocacy organizations in the city of Boston, like the Trans Queer Neighborhood Council, TQNC. They've been holding conversations across the city about what we can do to create more intentionally dedicated queer spaces. So that's not just bars and nightclubs, that's queer sober spaces, those are daytime spaces. There's an organization in Boston called the QT Library that is looking to set up Boston's first LGBTQ library. They should do that in Allston-Brighton. Like, we have so many opportunities to create physical safe spaces for us in this neighborhood, which is, I think, the one thing that we're truly lacking. Like, Allston-Brighton is always going to be the queer neighborhood in the city of Boston. I will make sure of that myself, guaranteed. But we do need to be doing a lot more to make sure that there are dedicated physical spaces that people can go to, not just for resources, but also to create a sense of community, which I think we've all been really, really sorely needing since the pandemic. And as city council, that's going to be a top priority for me.
Thank you, Jacob. Councilor, 2 minutes to yourself.
Yep. Well, interesting, little bit of history. There's 2 of us here tonight, LGBT. There was 2 of us in the first round in 2019. Jonathan Allen was on the ticket, was running in the preliminary round as well. And I may be the first out LGBT person on the city council, but I'm not the first. There were folks who didn't feel safe, were not able to be openly gay or out on the city council. Predecessors, so I'm honoured, and I really feel that when I came from Northern Ireland, I came for professional reasons, but then when I reflect on it, I didn't come just for professional reasons. I came for personal reasons as well. Because when I came to Boston and when I came to Allston-Brighton, I was able to live my life fully and be out as a lesbian in this neighbourhood and be accepted. And we have a diverse and welcoming community, and I really feel you're right, Jacob. This is a place for LGBT people to be themselves, and we should celebrate that. We have a ways to go. Unfortunately, we see an increased nationally. There's this narrative about increased anti-trans, anti-LGBT narrative. It's very dangerous because we have young people in our neighborhoods who are non-binary or questioning about their sexuality, and they still haven't figured it out. You don't really figure. I didn't figure it out until I was 27. Older than you were. But so we need to provide safe spaces and allow spaces for people to be themselves. I think a little bit of the other things that we've done. I see some of my LGBT neighbors and friends in the audience. We worked for marriage equality here in the neighborhood. I'm a founder member of About. I don't know, a few members of us are still here. Allston-Brighton Out. When the marriage equality conversation was going on, there was a lot of negative, nasty conversations about LGBT people in the neighborhood. And we as a group, we formed our own group About as a support group for ourselves, but also to be able to go to our elected representatives. A big shout out to Kevin Honan, it's the right thing to do, Liz. We support you. We support our gay LGBTQ community. I've supported the Pride project in Allston, in not Hyde Park, another neighborhood, which is LGBT friendly housing for elders. And, I think we have so much more work to do. And to be affirming of who everyone is. Everyone has their own individual personal journey. My story is different from Jacob's. Everyone's story is unique. We have to just recognize our common humanity and support each other and allow people to be themselves and live their lives as they choose. So, you know.
Thank you.
Liz.
Thank you, Liz, very much. Really appreciate both of you sharing something personal.
To just get a quick thing.
30 seconds.
30
Go
seconds.
ahead.
I'll take 10. Miss Trans Massachusetts is a Brighton resident, and she's currently competing to become Miss Trans USA. So I just wanted to give her a quick shout out. Queer history is alive and well here in Allston-Brighton, so we got to celebrate the people who are going out and leading. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Chelsea because she's rocking it. So thanks.
Thank you, Jacob. So the next question is regarding housing. Jacob, a great deal of your platform focuses on addressing challenges renters face in our neighborhood. And you've been a strong advocate for the renters experience, but in some instances, you voice preference to renting opportunities over ownership opportunities. Can you provide clarity on how your stance of home ownership in Allston-Brighton, and how can Allston-Brighton know you'll advocate for first-time home buyers, future and current homeowners, given your views?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in the family home for the first 15 years of my life, and it was great. I loved, having a family that had a home like that. My dad had a neurodegenerative disorder, and it made it hard for him to walk up and down stairs. So we sort of needed to relocate from the family home, and we started renting. And I kind of fell in love with it, I'm not gonna lie, because to me, renting meant that I didn't have to mow the lawn or rake the leaves. That's pretty much all I associated it with. And so we lived in a building that was, really great management company. They were quick to fix any repairs. So I kind of like to say that I've had the best of both worlds. I've seen what the best of home ownership can look like, and I've seen what the best of renting can look like. And the lessons that I learned is that, just because you don't have a family home doesn't mean you don't have a family, and that renting is a viable option for families. But also that the existing problems of being a homeowner, especially in a place like Allston-Brighton, are undeniable. I mean, let's talk about a couple of specific things that are impacting homeowners right now, right? So obviously we have the climate crisis, and the floods in this neighborhood have gotten out of control. And the flooding is impacting a lot of the neighborhoods where you're seeing larger numbers of homeowners. So they're footing the bill for the flood insurance that they have to pay. Same with the pest control problem. Pests are out of control, and they're eating through people's homes, and they're the ones who are paying for the exterminators. So to not talk necessarily about people who want to own their home, people who already own their home are struggling to pay their property taxes, to make sure that they don't have to pay exorbitant fees to get rid of the rat problem or to address the climate crisis. That's a real issue that we need to address, and I don't think that there's enough attention and resources going to them right now. When it comes to wanting to become a homeowner, I want nothing more than to be able to own a home in Allston-Brighton so I can start my family. I've been with my partner for 4 years. He's been an incredible partner, and we're ready to plant our roots here. But it's not even necessarily a question of making things easier to buy a home. It's about making them possible in the first place. That's how bad the situation has gotten in this neighborhood. And so I think that ultimately there's only so many home ownership classes that you can funnel people through before you realize that the issue is much larger and systemic in nature. The Boston Globe came out with a calculator to determine how long it will take you to be able to afford a down payment on a home in your neighborhood. I put in my information, and it will take me 33 years to put down a down payment on my current income. Maybe if I get the council job, I can shorten it down to 15 years. Fingers crossed, right? So that is just an undeniable problem that we're going through right now. And ultimately what we need to see is, if you want to own a home in Allston-Brighton, I want to make sure that we have all the resources for you, not just to buy that home, but to make sure that you are supported and financially stable when you own that home. Because we don't have a very large homeowning population here in Allston-Brighton, and those few that do are largely house poor. All their money's tied up in their home right now. And if we want to be serious about not only expanding access to home ownership, but also making it easier to be a homeowner in a place like Allston-Brighton, it's not just about getting you that down payment. It's about 30 years down the line as a homeowner. What are we doing to make sure that you have the services that you need to continue planting your roots in this neighborhood?
Thank you. And Liz, similar question. What will you advocate for homeowners in Allston-Brighton?
Homeownership is one way to build intergenerational wealth, and communities of color, that's have been blocked out of accessing that in many ways because of redlining, over the history of redlining in the city and in the United States. And right now, organizations like MAHA, I know Liz McGuire's here, she's involved with MAHA, they're really working to try and support folks to become homeowners. Homeowners is a way to guarantee control your housing costs over a long time. You have predictable outgoings on your mortgage for 30 years. That's like sort of you don't call it rent control, but it's a form of being able to control the cost of your housing going forward. The thing that we're up against in this neighborhood and across, you read about it, it's on the news frequently, that especially low-income communities are housing, family housing for families, housing stock. It's been bought up by investors, putting into a venture capitalists or private equity companies that are buying up family homes, one family homes in Springfield, in Allston-Brighton, in Mission Hill, and they're using it as an investment opportunity to maximize their wealth, and they're blocking the way for ordinary folks to become homeowners. They're blocking the opportunity for working families to put down roots and live in this neighborhood and across the city. You know, the two neighborhoods with the lowest level of homeownership in the city are Mission Hill and Allston. Why is that? Because we have institutions like universities who private investors will buy up the housing stock and rent it to students. And I think, you know, this is a capitalist country. We can't stop people making money. But the downside of that is that ordinary folks who want to buy a home are competing with folks who can come in with $1 million in cash and buy it sight unseen before other folks are able to get it together and even make an offer on a house. So that's not a level playing field. So home ownership is important, and I applaud you know, Tony Desidoro and the folks at ACA. We always, when there's a project coming in, we ask, is it a condo project? And a percentage of those projects are in IDP units. They're affordable, and they actually are affordable. And we have down payment assistance in the neighborhood. So, you know, don't say no, it's never going to happen. Keep your eyes open, keep your mind open. We're trying our best to offer those folks who want to have a home. We're trying to find ways to make it happen for them.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next question. This year, we were able to celebrate Allston-Brighton's very own Rock City Pizza as they were chosen for ESPN's 2023 Champion Black Business Program, and also awarded the Boston Celtics Power Forward grants. The Koji Club, a woman-owned business of the Charles River Speedway, has received both local and international recognition. And finally, Twin Donuts has recently been recognized as a 2023 inaugural legacy business from the city of Boston. As city councilor, how will you ensure we can grow and support diverse businesses in Allston-Brighton? Councilor Breedon, 2 minutes to you.
Love it. My Rock City Pizza in Allston-Brighton, in Oak Square, we have the Greenhouse Kitchen, fabulous place. And I'll say it again, I say it in every debate, they have a fabulous Mediterranean pizza, it's worth the trip. In Brighton Centre, there's a block called the Warren Hall. It is expiring use housing, 33 units of expiring use housing, and the ground floor are small shops, small retail spaces that are laying derelict, empty for a decade, at least a decade. Warren Hall has been brought into local ownership. I got on the phone, I started making calls. What about Warren Hall? What about Warren Hall? When can we get Warren Hall back into local ownership? It's now back in local ownership. Those 6 little shops are, I'm advocating that those spaces be opportunities for women or minority-owned businesses to get a start in Brighton Centre. Those are we have to sort of look at all the empty shop fronts in our neighborhoods and our main streets. Alex has them as well. Kelly has them in her main street. To try and activate those spaces to promote small businesses and just give people a foothold to start their business and grow their business in Allston-Brighton. You know, this is a rich community. We have so many. We have a lot of diversity. We have the best range of ethnic foods on Brighton Ave, from Union Square down to Packard's Corner. It was written up in the Globe a few years ago. The best range of ethnic foods outside of New York. So we have a lot to celebrate, but we also need to make sure that these businesses stay in business and that survive further than 5 years. And we need to patronize them. We need to support them. We need to work with our main streets to get them the help that they need. And I just think it's really part and parcel of what we are as a neighborhood to support those small businesses.
Thank you, Councilor. 2 minutes to you, Jacob.
Yeah, this is a tough question because I could spend 4 minutes just naming off all my favorite restaurants in the neighborhood, which is what I do honestly anytime. I talk to a bunch of people here, and whenever they tell me where they're from, I'm like, oh, you got to go to that restaurant, right? I have a really good story about supporting diverse businesses in Allston-Brighton. So when I was working as the director of public policy and communications for Julie Mejia's office, we were approached by a resident named Andre who lived in Brighton, who wanted to restart up his thriving fruit leather business that he had started when he was living in Los Angeles. But when he moved to Allston-Brighton, he found out that there weren't any laws on the books that made it legal for people to prepare certain kinds of foods in their own home and then sell them for retail profit. And so we put together a hearing order. We brought ISD to that conversation, and they told us that there are actually dozens of these kinds of operations going on throughout the city. Old grandmas making empanadas that they can sell in the quarter, like stuff like that you would associate with living in a city. Their practice, of course, was to crack down on them because they were an illegal use. But we sort of took it as an opportunity to re-examine, wouldn't this be a great opportunity to create a low threshold model towards getting into a small business community? So we created this ordinance called Retail Residential Kitchens, and all you need to do to start up a retail residential kitchen is pay a $100 permit and make sure that your home gets inspected by ISD. There's no zoning reform that you need to go through. You don't need to pay any expensive fees. It's a really great opportunity to create new low threshold opportunities for folks to start businesses before they matriculate up towards having a brick and mortar. Because I think when we're talking about supporting diverse businesses, it's not just talking about who owns those businesses, it's creating diverse business models that allow more people entry into this business world. Because the first floor commercial property in my building, they're asking $10,000 a month to open up shop there, and that's been vacant for the past 3 years. So there clearly needs to be more to ensure that the entrepreneurs who are in the city have the opportunity to build capital by starting lower threshold businesses. But we also do need to be supporting some of the amazing businesses in the neighborhood. I'm proud to have gotten a lot of support from Rhythm and Raps. NCO Realty is a great realty company in Allston that is working to create youth mentorship opportunities for Black and brown boys in all of our high schools. Day and Night Cereal Bar is going to be opening up in Oak Square, you guys. It's going to be a cereal bar where you can go get any cereal and toppings that you want. We have so many amazing diverse businesses from all different backgrounds, and the more that we have people who are ready to sort of be the mascot for these businesses on the city council, I think the better off we're going to be when it comes to actually supporting these business models.
Thank you so much.
One extra comment. The retail residential kitchens are great innovation. In practicalities, it's really difficult to set up, have a retail residential kitchen in your home. It's challenging. So I think another piece of the puzzle would be to have more venues like Commonwealth Kitchen, where you'd have a commissary type situation where you could come in for a time slot and use a commercial kitchen to prepare your product, and then have a way to store it. But that you wouldn't need to have the overhead of having your own bricks and mortar establishment. We see like Athens and Bright Center is closing. They have a commissary kitchen in the back. It's really the owner is struggling to find another location to be able to do his baking. He made the most incredible desserts and confectionery anywhere, and that's a challenge. And I think that's why I talk to Chief Shogun Idaho regularly about how we can incentivize and promote opportunities for these sort of small businesses to get started.
Thank you, Jacob, then a response?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as we started working on the retail residential kitchens ordinance, we heard some people, wouldn't it be great if there was another Commonwealth kitchen? Like, we've heard that phrase so many times, because we really do need like 20 more Commonwealth kitchens, in the same way that we need 20 more artist asylums and 20 more of these big spaces, but they don't exist currently. And if we're not working to create those spaces, then we need to work to create other lower threshold spaces, and that's exactly what we did. The threshold to getting a Commonwealth kitchen is much higher than it is to getting a retail residential kitchen off the ground. It's a $100 permit to start your business, and you need to get ISD to approve your site, which is a much lower threshold than is needed to create the need of commissary kitchens across the entire city of Boston, which is just such a high need. So we need to be innovative. We need to throw things against the wall and see if they stick. I'm really proud of the retail residential kitchens ordinance, because we have business owners now who are operating in the city of Boston that would have never had the opportunity to had that law not been put in place.
Thank you. We're gonna continue on with one more question and then time for closing. So Cindy, take us away with our last
The
question.
last question, of course, we live in Allston, so they have to be an arts-focused question. So Allston-Brighton has been home to the arts for decades, also known as Rock City Our neighborhood boasts a deep history with the arts, being the home to many budding artists like actor.
Actor Observer?
Yes, sorry,
Actor Observer.
I lost my spot. Actor Observer, who just recently played at Boston Calling and nominated for a Boston Music Award, all the way to being the first home to Aerosmith in the 70s. But recently, since the pandemic, we've lost both the Great Scott as a venue and the Sound Museum as rehearsal space for local artists. How, as city councilor, will you support artists in our neighborhood? And can you detail ways you will do so? So, Jacob, you can go first.
Sure. My partner is an artist. We've been, as I previously mentioned, we've been together for 4 years, and in that entire time, I've never really seen him like create art. And as someone who's like only tangentially involved in the arts world, I was like, well, let's take it to a Michael's. We'll get you some crafts, and we'll get you art again. But then we walked down one craft aisle of a Michael's, and I realized it's like, let alone the cost of living in a place like Allston-Brighton, the cost of producing art in Allston-Brighton is just exorbitant. It costs a lot of money for supplies, costs a lot of money for storage, costs a lot of money for housing. And those are all things that we're really struggling to have access to right now in the city of Boston, let alone access to performance space. I live right across from the Great Scott. I was looking out my window when I saw the green awnings get taken down from the Great Scott. We've lost the Great Scott, we've lost Wonder Bar, we've lost the Sound Museum, and that is going to have an incredible mark on this neighborhood. If we don't have those, we need to be working expeditiously to ensure that any new space that is being built up in the city of Boston, especially in Allston-Brighton, has artist space on site. So one of the things that I'm proposing as a councilor is to create what I'm calling an anti-displacement zone for artists in the city, in Allston-Brighton, which basically means that anytime a parcel is being put up for redevelopment and there's an existing arts use in that spot, say there's a rehearsal space or a gallery space, the city needs to step in to the developer and say, what are you going to do to preserve that use on that site, so that we don't end up with another Sound Museum where hundreds of artists are being kicked out of their property, the only place that they had to store and rehearse and celebrate themselves with other artists in the neighborhood. We also need to make sure that when we're developing new properties in the neighborhood, how can the city step in to say, well, what can you do to ensure that there's an artist use there? So for example, with the Great Scott, we've been working, No Advocates in the Neighborhood, including AVMS, has been working to figure out, can we get a gallery wall in the new Taco Bell that's going into the Great Scott? I want to see a performance space in that. The developers of that Taco Bell said they have yet to see a Taco Bell cantina with a stage in it for performances. Allston-Brighton should be the first place to have that done. And so I think that we need someone who's going to be a lot more proactive about stepping into these conversations before they reach a breaking point, before the artists are going to get evicted from the Sound Museum, to making sure that we're actually doing as much as we can to preserve these spaces and actively foster and grow them in the future in this neighborhood.
Thank you very much, Jacob. Councilor Breadon, how will you advocate for artists in Allston-Brighton, and what details can you provide for us for future plans?
Well, the issue with the displacement of especially music and performing artists, I was the lead sponsor on a hearing with Councilor Coletta from District 1 on exactly that issue. We, with development pressure, the land values are going up exponentially, and when landowners look at a piece of land, and the BPDA has this thing called the highest and best use. And the definition of the highest and best use in development circles is the use that will generate the most money for you. And when you talk about affordable housing, or even just grocery stores and retail and artist spaces, those are not the uses that are going to generate the most money, but they're very, 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 very important. So, we've seen the displacement. Studio 52 on Everett Street is gone. Great Scott is gone. The Sound Museum is gone. The Sound Museum, we dug our heels in and we said, we want the developer to either carve out on that site and build a new space for musicians to rehearse and record, and they said, no, couldn't do it. And we dug in and we said no. And after a long, long process, IQHQ bought a building in Brighton on North Beacon Street, and it has been gifted to the city, and it will be rehabbed and developed as a permanent rehearsal space in Brighton for musicians to rehearse. It was a long, hard fight, but IQHQ actually did that, and it's sort of unprecedented that has never ever happened. It's set a model for what we can be doing in the future. I also want, when development's happening, I want us to do an evaluation of displacement. We talk about displacement of people. We need to talk about displacement of small businesses. We need to talk about the displacement of artists, and what is the impact of all this sort of shiny, nice new glass development, and what are the costs, and how can we mitigate those impacts so that we can maintain an artist community in Allston-Brighton going forward. It's a great history. We want to keep it going.
Have a response, Jacob?
Yeah, so one quick thing on the Sound Museum is, I was working closely with a lot of the artists who were being displaced from the Sound Museum, and they didn't even know that they were going to have a swing space until about a month before they were set to be evicted. The communication that was going on between the artists who were living the realities in the Sound Museum and the people who were working behind the scenes to get that stuff done was virtually non-existent, which is why you had groups like PSL raising their voice and shouting to make sure that there was some sort of accountability. And it always feels in this neighborhood that unless there are people who are screaming and shouting to make their voices heard, that nothing's ever going to get done. So I really do credit the artists in this conversation. They made their voices heard. I was privileged enough to work for a city councilor who didn't mind if I needed to do a little yelling at a couple of meetings, which I certainly did myself in front of IQHQ. And so I think what the issue that we're dealing with here is so much of, when it comes to displacement of artists, we're being reactive, right? We didn't know that the Gray Scott was going to get shut down until the awnings get taken off the building. The artists at the Sound Museum didn't know that they were going to have a swing space until a month before they were going to get evicted. We need to be way more proactive when it comes to not only keeping in communication with the artists in this neighborhood, but also making sure we're doing right by them to ensure that we don't have to wait a month before they're going to get evicted to figure out what we're going to do to support them. So that's something that I think really needs to change in this neighborhood.
I think the other thing we need to do is, in terms of capacity building for our artist community, we need to anticipate that things are going to happen, and you need to have a plan. And one thing that, when we talk about the district-wide master plan, which is one of the benefits that we've been advocating for, to have an Allston-Brighton district master plan, was to actually see if we can establish an arts district where we would look at those things and say, how do we proactively create and preserve and create new spaces for artists in our neighborhood? It's so much part of who we are in Allston-Brighton. I think we have to be really proactive. We're actually fortunate in this moment that the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture is really sort of on the same page with us and trying to anticipate issues ahead of time and to try and be more proactive. We also need to build up some sort of a fund so that if there was a building available that we could purchase and make it a designated art space, it would have some money in the kitty. It's all very well saying we want to buy a building and keep it as an art space, but if we don't have the money, we can't do it. So we need some sort of sugar daddies or somebody to give us a pile of money to put in an arts fund so that we can buy a building and preserve it as an art space going forward.
Thank you, Councilor. Well, those are our questions. And so we will now enter our closing. And so we'll start first with you, Councilor Breedon. In reviewing your leadership so far as City Councilor, what are the actions and decisions you are most proud of?
Well, I can honestly say the last 4 years have been a bit of a whirlwind. We have had, there's been so much happening in the neighborhood and we have a lot of cohesion, we have a lot of energy, we have a very strong nonprofit sector in the neighborhood. So in terms of, what was the question again, the things I'm most proud of, I think one of the biggest achievements we celebrated yesterday was the groundbreaking of the Harvard what's the name of it? ERC. The ERC. The ERC, it was in the works before I was even elected, but it became apparent that, it's a huge piece of land. It was not going to meet the desires of the neighborhood. We were thinking about, we needed affordable housing. We got 25% in that portion of the ERC and a commitment to do 25% affordability going forward, with a range of affordability from 30 to 100% of the area median income. That's the first time that has ever happened in Boston. We got a commitment to help put 25 million into affordable housing fund. We got a commitment to fund a district-wide master plan and the needs assessment to inform that master plan. We have, what else did we get? We got a lot out of that. it just shows that when a community organizes and is united and stands up and asks for more, that we can get more. And I want to give a shout out to all the community advocates who participated in that process. None, our dear friend Cindy here, who was the leader of the Harvard Allston Task Force, you know, together we said, no, we want more. This is sort of a sort of groundbreaking for, you know, world-class development that's been funded by Harvard and Tishman Speyer. This neighborhood wants more out of this project. It has to have some, what are the mitigating, how are we going to mitigate this? What benefits can we get out of this for our neighborhood? So I would say that's our number one. But there's a few other things as well. I'm not go on. We got labs for Brighton High School. We got blah, blah, blah. We got the sound museum replacement for recording artists. We have a lot of really great achievements under our belt.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Councilor. So Jacob, if you're elected city council, what would be your actions and decisions that you would be most proud of after your shift?
That's a great question. You already got me preparing for my closing speech on the council, don't you? Actually, this is a real fact. A dream of mine I've always had is at the end of my tenure on the council, I would give a speech to say that every single public speech I've ever given is tied, and if you play them backwards, a secret message will be released. That's just a little plan that I have. Anyway, after my first year in office, I want to be really proud to have said that we have reduced the rat problem in this neighborhood substantially by appointing a rat czar, creating more trash pickups in the neighborhood, and making sure that we're creating zoning reform to achieve proper trash disposal standards. I also want to walk away from my first term being proud to say that we actually did something with housing and tenants protections, expanding tenants protections. City Council has a lot of authority when it comes to making it easier and more affordable to be a renter in this neighborhood. And I think that we have a lot of work to do. And I've been working with housing advocates. I've been a housing advocate myself, and I feel confident that we'd be able to walk away with a number of achievements there. I also want to see way more access to artist space in the neighborhood. I want next year's Rat City Arts Fest to be the biggest and best that it's been, because every year it's just been getting better and better and better. I think that there is so much room for growth in this neighborhood. I want people to know that if they're not happy with the status quo of what's going on right now, you have a different direction that you can take, and that I'm ready to create an Allston-Brighton with all of you that is more affordable, more inclusive, more welcoming, more accessible, where people are actually able to plant their roots and where people can come together instead of having to move away. And I really hope to have that opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Breedon, Jacob, thank you so much for participating in tonight's debate. For those in the audience and those joining us on Zoom, hi. Like I haven't looked at you in a while, but just hello. We know you're there. You're out there. Thank you so much for participating in today's debate. If you signed in on those sign-in sheets or participated with our registration via Zoom, we will email you out more content from both candidates, their websites, and just information so you can understand fully what it means to vote next week on November 7th. Please do. And if you are registered to vote, or even if this is your first year, you're still registered in another state, thank you for participating in these topics, learning what are the priorities of Allston-Brighton, and just overall, the goals that we could potentially have from city councilors here representing us in our neighborhood. So again, my name is Ricky Meinke, and along with Cindy, it's been a pleasure to host tonight's debate. Thank you so much, everyone.
And you guys were very well behaved. Thank you.
Get to vote. November 7th.
Don't forget to take the food home.